Thanks for joining us at the Business Growth Cafe, where each week we select from a menu of topics for a focused discussion with an industry expert to provide insights that can impact your business's growth. With your host, Angelo Ponzi.
Hi, I'm Angelo Ponzi, your host here at the Business Growth Cafe, and thank you for joining us. Excited about today's show and my guest because we're going to talk about happiness. Now, you can't listen to this show without being happy. And ultimately, that's what we all want out of life, to be happy, right? I found these couple quotes that I want to read first. Is happiness depends upon ourselves. And that was Aristotle. So it wasn't like yesterday, it was centuries ago. And I think it's so important when we think about who we are as individuals. I've been told that nobody can make you feel sad about yourself except yourself. And the same thing, happiness really depends on us. And so I think that's extremely important. And again, we're going to get into some of this today. And the other one I want to read is happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. Now, I know you won't guess this out there, but it's the Dalai Lama. Yes, I did reach back into history to grab some of these. And there's many, many, many more. But I think it's important when we start thinking about happiness when it comes to your personal happiness and happiness at work. And we're going to dig into that. So joining me at the cafe from the UK today is Nick Marks, CEO and founder of Friday Pulse. He's a statistician, a happiness expert, and a TED Talk speaker. But before we get into our conversation, I want to take a quick break.
I was recently speaking with the president of a manufacturing company. When the topic turned to competitors, his response was, "We don't have any competitors. We're the market leaders, and they look to us for their cues. I don't pay any attention or worry about them at all." How many times have you heard this said? For me, as a marketer, plenty. Regardless if you're the market leader, a challenger, you have competition. Whether your competition is a specific company, new technology, or anything else that changes the dynamics of the market you serve, you have a competitor. You need to consider setting up a competitive intelligence program as an ongoing business strategy and not treat your program as an annual task. In my opinion, understanding your competition is as important as understanding your customers. To help you begin thinking about the process, time requirements, and the monetary investment that it takes to develop and implement an effective program, I've created an ebook as a resource that you can find on my website at theponzigroup.com. An effective competitive program helps you keep one eye on your competition while keeping one eye on opportunities. Thank you again, and I appreciate your listening.
As I mentioned, I'm joined today by Nick Marks, founder of Friday Pulse, statistician, happiness expert, and TED Talk speaker. Nick, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. I got a smile on my face. They can't see the video, so you got the heavy burden today to make me happy. So, and so that's what I'd like to do. I think we're going to share a lot of things as we go through this. And I found what you're doing really fascinating. Part of my background is market research. And so I do go out and I talk to customers, I talk to employees. And so I've dug into not what you're doing, but certainly trying to get a pulse on what's going on, whether it's in the marketplace or within the four walls of a company. But before we get into all of that, let's tell the audience a little bit from your perspective of what you do and who you are to kick this off.
Yeah, I'm a statistician, as you said. That's my sort of trade. I was always good at mathematics at school, and I went to university to do that. But I actually discovered I was an applied statistician. I like numbers more than pure mathematics. And so when I left university, I started working on health statistics in consultancy and that sort of way. But then I had a slightly quirky side in that my mother was a family therapist, and I also became a therapist. And so then it perhaps becomes inevitable that I end up doing statistics on people's experience of life and ultimately their happiness. And that's sort of kind of been my journey. And now I worked a lot in the policy field. I used to advise the UK government on how to measure well-being. And that's what my TED Talk was on. But since I did that, I've now been thinking about work and about how we measure experience of work, and actually why employee happiness is actually a really good measure of how well the people in a company are doing. And that's kind of what I do. But happiness is such an interesting subject and people's well-being that it keeps me very fascinated as well.
Oh, I think it's what you're doing is well, frankly, it's so needed. I think, and I talk a lot as a marketer when I speak to my clients, is we have to understand what's going on in the four walls. We have to include the employees. They have to understand what we're doing to help grow the business, so they have confidence and they feel good about what they're doing. There's so many times I walk down the hallways of a client and I'll say to the accounting person, for example, hey, how do you like the new campaign? How do you like what's going on and all the business that we're generating or whatever? And she'll say, yeah, I see the business because I do the books, but I don't know what's different. I have no idea what's going on in the other side of the building. And so I really look at how do I build campaigns, if you will, to make sure there's an inclusion. I worked with a company one time, and they were growing really rapidly, and literally the CEO was borrowing on credit cards one year, and the year after that she's buying property and doing all this investing, and I walked in one day and she had pictures of all the things she was acquiring on the wall in the lunchroom. And I could tell people were looking at it, and in the meantime, I know that, Bob over there didn't get his raise, and, somebody was, that kind of stuff. And I had to go in and say, look, we got to take these things down, because you might be proud and happy and you're showing them that their productivity is helping you, but there's not anything that's reciprocal for them. And frankly, it's sending a bad message through the office. Yeah. And if they can see your face on this video, it's crazy, this stuff people do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you have to build a company that you're all in it together, and that part of that is reward and recognition. I mean, part of it is soft stuff that actually appreciates people. But if you're suddenly making money, then give people bonuses. I mean, they're the ones working for you, with you. So I do find that a bit shocking.
Yeah. Well, so did I. Because I think it was maybe Mark Cuban said, if you don't have customers, you don't have a business. And I believe in that. But I also believe if you don't have really solid employees, they're going to do that work for you, you also don't have a business, or you're a solo entrepreneur and you're never going to grow or go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Hsieh, who CEO of Zappos, famously thought about happiness in his culture quite a lot, wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. And he says that if you want happy customers, you've got to have happy employees. And that's the only route to it. And actually brings up some tensions, like, the sort of idea that the customer is always right is actually oppressive to employees sometimes, because sometimes customers aren't right, and sometimes customers are very difficult, and actually, where do you put your priority? Maybe actually you should be saying, actually, my employee is right. And I know it's a difficult space, but your organization is a people business, whatever business you're in, and ensuring that people feel like they belong, feel like they're contributing, feel like they get along with other people, feel like they're treated fairly. So your last example really is people not feeling they're treated fairly. So there's a very, very fundamental things to people's experience at work.
Yeah. So before we dive into this a little bit further, I do ask some questions of all my guests. And so the first one, when you think about your business in growing your business, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I mean, I am a business guy now, but that hasn't been my past. My past has been a researcher and an advocate for this area. And I founded a business about 8 years ago in this space, and it's taken me a bit of a journey. And I think that's kept me up at work is not feeling in control, not understanding what the levers were to push. And my journey has been like understanding, one, what the product wanted to define, two, what the business model of that is. And so I feel less kept up at night now, because I kind of understand how the bits fit together, but it took me a long time to do that. I mean, obviously, coronavirus striking is very hard for every business person out there, and I had quite a few sleepless nights at that time. I had to furlough, is what we're doing in the UK when you put someone on temporary unemployment, a couple of people. I had to ask my staff to take a pay cut because we lost two of our biggest clients. But we've all got through it, and I actually feel much better than I did 12 weeks ago now. But there are things that keep, and normally, I mean, often I feel out of my own depth, in things. That's what keeps me up and awake. My employees are great. It's often me I have the problem with.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, again, the coronavirus certainly threw all of us a curveball. Just like for me, the 2008 recession. I mean, nobody predicted that thing was going to really go the way it went. And I actually tried to start a new business in 2008, 2009. And man, it just could not get any traction and things like that. And so, that was for me, those sleepless nights of growing a business. And really, and you just starting a business 8 years ago, I mean, you got the startup, blues, if you will, right? Because you're trying to figure it out as you're going along. One day you're by yourself, and the next day you have employees. So I've taken that journey a few times, and it's if you care about your business, care about your clients, care about your employees, one of that combination, somebody's going to keep you up at night. So
yeah.
The next question is, what is the best business advice you've ever received and or given, if it's different?
Cool. The best business advice I've received. I think it's probably got to be about learning what cash flow was. It's simple as that in some ways, isn't it? I'm a sort of quite a visionary thinking, and I can get a little bit up in the sky. And I have a very good advisor called Brian, and he keeps me in the cash and how cash flow works, and explains to me about annual contracts in advance rather than monthly payments, and all these ways and I think it's a bit like that old sort of golf thing, that you drive for show and you putt for dough. I think that focus on the cash is really probably the thing I do. I mean, you do need that whole planning process, and you do need that clarity. I mean, the cash only comes with that clarity, in the sense that the cash is at the end is the bit that is the sign of success. But all that planning to make sure that you have your 3-month goals, you have your 3-year goals, and you put them into practice and get into that real sort of weekly, quarterly flow. I think I was living very much 2-3 years in the future when I started founding a business, because I had a big idea and a big plan, and wanted to do things. And actually, now that the business is starting to tick, it's because we know what our 3-month goals are. We know what we're trying to do this week and what we're trying to achieve, and it's getting it in that. So, like, is he called Vern Harnish, who does Scale Up? That idea that you really get into that rhythm of business. So I think that's the way, the advice. It's not just one person, it's probably many, but I think that's what it is, to move from being vision into being execution has been my learning. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard of a book called Traction?
What was the book called? Sorry.
Traction. It's about the EOS implementation process.
I have heard of the EOS, and I probably have heard of the book. I haven't read it. I've read Vern Harsh's Scale-ish, and I work a little bit with a consultant who helps me a bit on that too. But yeah, it is Traction. Anyway, I agree with the title.
Yeah. Well, it's a good book, and it's a good process. Sounds like you're doing some of it already. I mean, some of these overlap, but it again, methodology. And I'm a firm believer in what you're doing is, I like to go out 3 to 5 years, but I'm more concerned about in the implementation of the next 90 days, right? What's going to happen in 90 days, not what's going to happen. Even I tell my clients now, yeah, we need to think about the end of the year and next year, but I need to make sure you're back in business in the next 90 days, or we got bigger problems. We'll never hit 3 years if we can't, get it going now.
Yeah.
The last question is your journey, and now your journey as a business owner. If it was a book, what would the title be?
Random Walk. I mean, in a way, it sort of felt purposeful, but the direction only emerges after a time. And it's like, who would think that doing statistics and therapy when you were young would sort of come together into something quite coherent? And I had an unexpected success around 2006 when I published this report called the Happy Planet Index, which led to my TED Talk and led to all sorts of other things. But, I didn't expect the world to agree with me. I knew I agreed with me. I knew I agreed that I thought measuring the experience of population was a much better way of doing it than measuring GDP. But I didn't expect to sort of get so much agreement with what we were doing. I thought I was a bit too radical. And then there's sort of, so I think it'd be called Random Walk, but that's not a very good title. It's been unexpectedly successful. Let's put it that way.
All right. We'll go with that. So, I mean, happiness then really in kind of area of influencing organizational development and getting companies focused on their employees and how happiness can benefit them, which I think it's obvious. A lot of these things are obvious to me, but then, we don't implement them. So let's start, I think, with the Friday Pulse, right? And we're going to start digging into pieces. So how does it work? What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, so Friday Pulse, we tried to name it to say what it does, which is on a Friday, i.e. the end of the week, it asks you how your week was. And it's trying to give the senior leaders like a finger on the pulse of the organization. So it's a measure of employee experience or in happiness or team morale, really, because actually when you gather at team level, it shows you how each team's doing. And that's really critical information because people's emotional experience of work is data. Our feelings are data. We don't necessarily put them into numbers, but feelings guide us in the world. They really help us monitor what's going on. So when we feel good, things are going well. When we feel bad, things aren't going well. So you can pick that up statistically. And in my opinion, every senior leader should want to know how their teams are doing at least every month, because most people metrics in organizations are what we statisticians call a lagging indicator. They're looking back at what's happened. So they're basically saying how many people left last year, how many people were absent. Maybe you did an engagement survey or staff survey once a year, but that only tells you one snapshot. So instead of that, what we do is we ask people just that one question every week, like how have you felt this week? And you create a very mobile, very responsive metric about how teams are doing, because the reality is we have good and bad weeks at work. The trick is to have more good weeks than bad weeks. It's not to have no bad weeks, because in a sense, if something's going wrong, you want people to feel bad because that's the motivation to fix it. You can't. But what you want them to do is to mainly have things going well, and then they can deal with things that come out. And so that's what Friday Pulse does. It does a couple of other things, which it really helps us pay attention to successes. In that, as humans have got a very, very strong what we call negativity bias, that we focus on what went wrong. We focus on what our biggest challenge are, and we forget to notice what's gone right, to build on those successes, to pat ourselves on the back. So we ask people to call out successes for themselves, other people that they see doing things well, they want to thank or shout out for them, ideas about how to build a better company team, get to share those things, and their frustrations, so there's things to fix. And that's how Friday Pulse works. The only other thing we do is every quarter we do what we call a culture deep dive profile, which is just go into 15 things which we know drive better cultures, and that sits in parallel. But the weekly flow is the main way it works, and it's a check-in on how your people are doing every week.
So it's a multiple part, I'll call it questionnaire in a sense, a survey?
Yeah, it's 2 minutes. The first question is, how have you felt this week? You answer from very unhappy to very happy, 5 points. And then you've got little cards you can fill in that are not anonymous. They're named, which are like what's your success, what you want to thank. So it's very, very quick and easy on a Friday. And then we feed all that data back to team leaders on a Monday morning, to senior leaders in a more data format. The team leaders have the sort of the text data, so they can talk in the teams about what the successes are. And the senior leaders have it quantified. And so it's like providing a reporting system. It's also providing a team building tool in a sense that's sort of, every week in an organization. So yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Is this automated in the sense that your employees go in, they fill this out, and the report is generated and right on a dashboard for the senior management?
Yeah, it's a cloud-based software. So it all just works totally smoothly. So, behind the scenes, you've got a list of all the people you're contacting, storing all of the data according to all the requirements you need to, and then you're just putting it back out again in nice reports. And we could sort of send a team leader sort of like a PowerPoint on a Monday morning that they can run a team meeting from, and so it's just trying to make it nice and easy. And you're trying to get people to just talk a little bit more about their experience of work every week, half an hour a week, 20 minutes a week, and then that helps to build over time.
There's a research guy coming out in me. So when you're asking, Angelo, how do you feel today on a scale of 1 to 10, I think you said, or 1 to 5, whatever it is, and I'm not very happy today. Do you follow up with a why? Or do you stay away from open ends?
So the open ends are, have you got a frustration? So you can write what you want to in the frustration. And and if you said you're unhappy, we put the frustration in front of you first rather than the success, because that's respectful if you just said you're unhappy. But and some people will answer you honestly, the numeric one, but they don't really want to tell you why. But then that can come out in team meetings, and discussions there. So there are different ways that people, mainly you're trying to build what Amy Edmondson would call psychological safety. You're getting people to share stuff, getting people to talk about it, and it's something that builds over time, that respect. And you're trying to help a team leader be a better team leader by having the right conversations every week. And lots of team leaders are promoted for seniority or for technical skills, not necessarily people skills. So it's trying to actually be on their side and help them have better conversations too.
What I find is, and I love this, by the way. I mean, I think this is fantastic. But what I find is, what is the kind of the time frame to getting employees comfortable to make these comments? And that comes from a lot of my own experience in doing employee surveys. Getting them to realize, number one, I'm not necessarily going to tell who said it, right? So it's anonymous and you're collecting that data. But in your case, it sounds like you kind of need to know who's unhappy and who's not unhappy.
Well, we anyone that answers a numeric question, it's anonymous, but we group them together in teams. So if it's a group of more than 3 people, we'll show a score. If it's only 2 or 1, we won't do. Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's really important in that kind of feedback. And the other, where I think going next is they, CEO of the company, I get this report and it's giving me guidance and letting me know and offering me up, I assume, recommendations on things I should maybe be doing. But just like from a marketing standpoint and developing strategic plans, so many times that, we all agree and we're marching forward, and then only to find out, a month later, 2 months later, that they veered off track. They didn't implement the things they said they were going to say. And all that work and all that effort is just, collecting dust, or in this case, taking up disk space. So do you get involved in coaching and helping businesses on a regular basis as part of your offering?
So we don't do that ourselves. We do speak to our clients and we help them interpret the data, because particularly it's kind of new types of data, particularly the time series data. So we do some sort of talking with them and guiding with them, but we're not a training or consultancy company. But we try and build an awful lot of nudges into the tools. So a lot of the tools design is based on, yes, positive psychology, but also behavioral science, like how nudges work, and also systems thinking. I mean, effectively what we're doing is we're building a feedback loop, a learning feedback loop for an organization. We're saying, this is what people are doing. We feed that straight back to you, and we're helping you see your company in a different way. So we're more of a sort of very light touch cloud-based software than a training company, but we work with quite a lot of coaches who do that work with their clients, and then they use our data included in that. So, yeah.
Okay. So from your website, I pulled these few statements. Positive emotions are an important part of the program. Positive emotions improve physical health, intellectual abilities, psychological resilience, and our relationships. Happiness is how we naturally talk about positivity and all of the benefits that flow from feeling upbeat. Happy is what we want for our children, and it's what we want to be at work. So let's dig into the term positivity and talk about how you make sure that that's being instilled and how that emotion change. I think kind of a change in how people have perspective in what they do and what makes them happy. I mean, there's a statistic that I've used before I actually let you talk. Sorry, is and this is more here in the United States, but the last time I saw this, which is probably even changed now, but 85% of American workers are either unhappy or disengaged. So that's a huge uphill battle to turn that kind of environment of people that are unhappy in their work to become more positive about what they're doing and things like that. So let's talk about positivity then.
Yeah, so I think if you think of positivity, you have to balance it against negativity. And in psychology, we talk about negative and positive emotions. And that's not that negative emotions are dysfunctional. They're highly functional. Things like anger and fear are part of the fight and flight mechanism. They help us survive. But the positive emotions are what help us thrive. They help us create and seize opportunities in the world. And we use happiness as a word that sort of covers them all. But if I say to someone, what is happiness? Some people will say to me, it's contentment. And some will say it's joy. And they're quite different things, contentment and joy. So it's actually recognizing there's a whole array of positive emotions. And we can talk about a lot of them, from, yes, enjoyment and amusement, which actually, interestingly, we use less cognitive functioning with those ones. We're basically in a situation where we're having a laugh with people, we're enjoying ourselves. We don't want to bring our brightest, most intelligent, most provocative selves to those conversations. Whereas actually at work, you do want people to bring their brightest, most provocative selves in appropriate settings. So at work, we really need to think about what we mean by positivity. And I think we include things like curiosity, interest, pride, or awe, which help us sort of set bigger goals. Yes, enjoyment sometimes, in the sense that it's good to sometimes have a break and play table tennis or have a funny chat with somebody, but not all of the time. And you need those reflective energies too, about feeling satisfied or content, where you're reflecting on what's going on. So when I think about positivity in teams and organizations, I'm thinking about sort of an agility to move between a whole space, and sometimes actually to be in the space of negative emotions. There might be things to be angry about. The worst thing, though, is to be angry with your boss or frightened of a peer, because then you're just blocked. It's okay to be frightened about what's going on in the market, or worried about something that's going on, that you need to achieve. That's good energy. But if you're just in a relationship where you're just frightened of speaking out, then that's just a big block.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. So there's always a financial impact, if you will, based on that statistic that I just said, on a business. If you have unhappy employees and people that are fearful. I've worked in actually the organization I was talking about in the beginning of this. I mean, most of the employees were extremely afraid of the CEO.
Yeah.
And, when they would come into I use the they, so I can't say whether it's a male or female, but when they would walk into the office, I mean, heads would go down and people told me in their surveys, for fear if I catch their eye, I could be the next one on the chopping block.
Yeah.
And then 20 minutes later, they're happy and they're doing something very positive. So there's a kind of the schizophrenia going on as far as leadership. So there's an impact based on that happiness or engagement. So when you deal with an organization, is that part of the conversation you have? What's the ROI on this? What are the KPIs? How do you measure? What are the KPIs on your, when you're implementing a program like this? And it's not just your program in a sense, but it's how do you judge KPIs on happiness and the benefit of happiness?
So I can give you a strict statistical answer on return investment, which I think it's about 6 times in every year. And that's 6 times the investment. And what's the investment? The investment is about half an hour a week to have better conversations at a team level. What's the return on that investment? Well, it's an increase in productivity, it's a reduction in staff turnover, and it's an increase in creativity and innovation. Those are the main things. It also reduces absenteeism and sickness absence and insurance as well. But the big ones are retention. It's that we know that if a team, so we use a 5-point scale, and if the team's average moves up half a point on that, from 3 to 3.5 or whatever, we know that is related to 17% staff turnover reduction next quarter. It's very rapid, the effect on staff turnover. It makes sense. If we're unhappy, we move. It's also related to about a 7% increase in productivity, which is pretty big, when you think about, things, because that's across all sectors, and different sectors do vary with this. If you're in manufacturing, it's probably low. It's probably about 5%. And that's about, looking after machines and everything working, the quality control going better. If you are in a creative industry, it's probably as high as 25% extra productivity, because you're basically about collaboration, you're about creativity, you're about communication, and all of those things are very interdependent between people's experience of each other. So these effects are massive, absolutely massive. So if you add up those things, then then half an hour a week is about whatever it is, out of a 40-hour week, it's about 1.5% of their working week, 7% extra productivity. You've got a 5-fold increase there straight away. So the return on investments are very, very big. And in fact, we designed something called a resilience calculator on our website, and you can put in the number of people in your company there, and it will give you an estimate of how much you could save, how much you could avoid losing every year for having low team morale. And you can put in some parameters around the type of company you are. So the figures are pretty hard and fast. I'm pretty confident in them as a statistician. It's interesting that they still don't persuade people sometimes. Why is it that you can have all the data in the right way and people still don't want to do it? I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, well, what you're doing is brilliant. I love it. And I think to answer your question as a researcher, I can't tell you how many times I stood in front of somebody, presented, the data, all the scientific. I have a data scientist that works with me, so a statistician, all the validity in it, and they sit there and they go, "Yeah, I don't believe it." It's like, I'm sorry, what? I worked on a potential, I didn't work on the show, but I was in the action sports industry for a long time. And so I worked with trying to bring out a new TV show for the action sports industry. And the head guys out of New York came out all in their suits. And we're now talking to skateboarders, which are, 14, 15, 16. And we're doing this concept of this show. And we did, I don't know, maybe 8 focus groups. And at the end, gave them a report and presented it to them and said, this show is not going to work, and here's why. Here are the changes you need to make. And they basically said, we don't believe anything those kids said. They don't know anything. And so they did what they wanted to do, and the show failed in 6 months. And to your point, why? Why wouldn't you listen? Why? I'm telling you, you've got a problem. Go fix it. The data's telling you that. So anyway.
I remember once hearing Elon Musk interviewed, and it was actually at TED. So it was Chris Anderson from TED who was interviewing him, and he asked him what was the thing that he couldn't get about leaders. He said, not listening to negative feedback. He said, why don't leaders? That's exactly what you need to do to fix things, And but of course, you need to be slightly robust to do that. You need to be open. You need to, not have too much ego in the way. But, if you're building a business, wouldn't you want 7% extra productivity? I don't know why, And actually, there's data that shows that it translates into share price growth, that if organizations are listed, the ones that have traditionally and consistently done well on things like Great Place to Work list or on Glassdoor, their share price outperforms by about 3% per annum, which is kind of what Warren Buffett looks for extra returns on the market. Yeah. So 3% doesn't sound much, but you compound that up over a few years and it's very big. And so, it's sort of aligned with this stuff. I mean, one of the reasons it's not easy to create an open, authentic organization. It's effortful. And you can't, and telling people is much easier than asking them. Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to those very basic things. My dad used to run a business which had a factory, and right back in the 1970s, he made just one entrance into the factory, that the workers and the management came in the same door. And he made one canteen and things like that, because they used to be really hierarchical, these organizations. And I spoke to someone who was, my dad died a few years ago, but I spoke to this guy who used to work for him then. And he said, it was quite hard being in management because we couldn't tell people what to do. We had to get the team together and ask them. He said, but after about a year, we worked out it was much better, but it made my job hard.
Yeah. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So really, Ben, when you're talking, so a question I have here is, what's something people seem to misunderstand about your offering? And then, I think it's, we're laying this out. And again, maybe it's just because of my background, but there's a lot of clarity to what you're doing. But to your point is they just sometimes just don't get it and don't understand it. So what do you think is kind of the, put your marketing hat on. What do you think is the one thing that they're not getting, and why there's a misunderstanding of, to me, it's like, hell, this makes a lot of sense. This is something I should do. Absolutely.
Well, I think a lot of people will approach the word happiness and say it's fluffy, and they say, and they get into the idea that, being happy is playing table tennis or having a beer or pizza. It's not about the work. And so I think that's, in some ways, that's a reasonable critique, but that's the broader positive emotions bit. And I think they think the data won't be reliable. But what we normally get is particularly skeptical senior managers who maybe the HR director, the people director gets them to do it, will say after about a month, wow, I'm fascinated in this data. I didn't know you could see this data. You see it team by team. You see which teams are struggling. You see which are bouncing back. It's like one number is very rich if you've got a good number that you're doing. Like people use Net Promoter Score, which is a pretty good number. I mean, I have slight critiques with it, but it's a pretty good number.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah, but businesses have been absolutely flourished by really paying attention to Net Promoter Score. I'm quite convinced that employee happiness is so much better a measure than employee engagement. And if you look at engagement, people don't even know what engagement is. If I say to people, "Are you engaged at work?" They go, "Oh, I don't quite understand what you mean." When I say if you're happy, they can give you an answer. It's in their language. And really engagement is just a code word, a business code word for productivity. It's like, how productive are you? Is how engaged you are. So actually, employees aren't stupid. They feel like you're just trying to get more out of them for the same money. So it feels a little extractive. Whereas if you say you want to make a job they enjoy, suddenly it's a gift, and then they will reward you. So the enlightened leader will understand that working with employee happiness or employee experience, you can call it that if you want to, is got to be a better way of doing it. So it's partly a selling case, but actually we do find, I mean, people haven't thought about doing this very much. They haven't thought about measuring every week. They haven't thought about, why their engagement surveys aren't working. But actually with COVID, suddenly everyone's very aware that things can change exceptionally quickly. And we've actually got a graph of COVID hitting all across our clients. And it's the first time we've got a big thing happening across all of our clients. And it just dips middle of March and then starts to come back again. And it's not quite back to where it was before, because these are people still employed, still in businesses that, we've lost clients because, they went under. So there's all sorts of people who are unemployed or furloughed. But these are businesses that are still surviving, and they've just got, they're not back to where they were yet, and that's their struggle. It's our struggle as a business too, but yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's actually a lot of the conversation I have with businesses is, how do we come back from this? What's the plan? You just can't, hope is not a strategy, and you have to think about what are the impacts. I mean, I talk about what ifs. What if COVID comes back again in August, September, October? I mean, we're foolish if we don't plan for it, because already I think the news this morning talked about 7 states here in the U.S. have had a resurgence of it, which is about 14 days or so given Memorial Day, which was a holiday here when everybody got back together. So you have to plan and you have to think about those things. So we're running out of time, but I do have a few more questions. And one I'd like is, I like stories. So tell me a positive story about positivity with one of your clients and how they benefited working with you.
Yeah, so we have a client which is they work in they're basically a tech business, but they're scaling up, they're growing very quickly, and they've done that thing where they are bursting through the 100-person barrier. There's something called the Dunbar number. Do you know, 150, which is like the size of our sort of social networks as a sort of human ecological sort of approach to how we live. And they're moving through that. And so they basically got to the stage where the CEO doesn't know everyone's name and things like that. So they're trying to systemize things. And the leaders didn't want to lose something, but they needed to grow for their investors and everything like that. So they worked with us, and they firstly, the CEO was very skeptical to begin with. He's quite a numbers focused guy, and I was trying to tell him that these are numbers about people's feelings. He didn't really believe it, but the head of operations really liked it. And then over a 6-month period, I mean, they've had a bumpy ride. They went up to 180 people. They came back to 120. They're now 150. They sort of made mistakes. But all through that, they've kept measuring, and they've really focused on supporting team leaders to be the best team leaders they are. And some of these team leaders are very techie people, and they're not used to running teams. So just helping them have better conversations each week has helped them get through it. And they've had weeks where their scores crashed. We present things in a scale of 0 to 100 when I was presenting results. They crashed down to 25, and then they bounced back again. But they've really stuck with it, and it's a brave thing to do, because you're asking for feedback and you're having to act on it. But they're now growing again, having made one false start. And I think it's having that immediate data, and it goes into their mindset, because they are sort of tech people and they've got a sort of SaaS product which is repeatable revenue. They get that they need to be ahead on these numbers, and they use them in their monthly meetings. So in that way, it works really well. But even though they've had a difficult ride, they kept going with it.
Okay, all right. So thank you for that. My show is about business and how to help businesses grow and be successful. So as our parting question then, what are 2 pieces of advice thinking about happiness and employee welfare would you give to companies that they need to be concerned about and implement in order to be successful?
I think that celebrate successes together. So go back to your first story, not just for the CEO, for everybody, in that if everyone's working together hard, it's actually, making sure that you look after everybody, include them, and whether that's micro successes on a weekly basis, but also the macro ones, you meet your targets, is make sure you mark those moments, because there's always going to be challenges ahead. And if we don't take the time to just sit there and go, yeah, good job, we've done that, I think we all feel expanded from that. So I think one thing is about celebrating successes. And the other thing is, I would say, is just don't let things fester. If there is a problem, let's face it as soon as possible. You might have to make a division redundant because your business model is changing, whatever. But getting to those difficult things quickly, dealing with them honestly and authentically, showing your vulnerability as a leader, is a good thing. So I think it's really those two things: taking the time to celebrate successes and dealing with frustrations as quickly as you can do.
Wow, brilliant! I love that. Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'm so glad we connected. I don't remember how we even connected, but whoever connected us, I appreciate it. So, Nick, tell the listeners, give them your contact information, how they can reach you, find out more about Friday Pulse and what you're doing.
Yeah, I will. So we're Friday Pulse. FridayPulse.com is our website, so we're quite easy to find. We are free to use for 3 months, so you can come along and try us and then see if you like the data, and then decide whether you want to use it further. I also have my own website, which is about my sort of musings as a statistician, and that's nickmarks.org. So Nick, no K. I'm active on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. So you find me quite easily. Nick Marks, LinkedIn, Friday Pulse, you'll get me. That's the best place to connect me. So do send me an invite. And probably the only other thing to say is we're just starting a affiliate program, so people can point people to us, and we'll work with you with your clients or your contacts to introduce them to Friday Pulse, and we'll obviously make that reciprocal relationship.
All right, fantastic. That's really good news, and I'll get that info, where to connect on that, and put it into the notes. So again, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us at the cafe today. You can find out more about me, read my blogs, view my videos, or sign up to receive more information at theponzigroup.com, or certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. And if your business is ready for growth and you need a chief marketing officer, but you're not quite ready for a full-time person yet, connect with me. I'd love the opportunity to explore the benefits of using a fractional CMO. And lastly, please subscribe to this show. And if you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to think about others who would enjoy this content like we had today. Fantastic. You can sign up at thebusinessgrowthcafe.com or on any major podcast platform that you like to listen to. Join me next week at the Business Growth Cafe. Nick, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion at the Business Growth Cafe with your host, Angelo Ponzi. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at www.businessgrowthcafe.com. Read Angelo Ponzi's blogs at www.theponzigroup.com.